I usually don't ask this early, but if you could like the video and subscribe, it would mean a lot. We're so close to hitting 10,000 subscribers, and your support can really help get my content out there. Thanks, Tom Davies wiped his hands on his jeans, tired, but satisfied. He'd spent the day fixing the fence in their backyard, the kind of manual labor that kept his mind focused and calm. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the smell of cut grass and fresh wood shavings filled the air. He went inside to wash up, his worn boots echoing on the hardwood floor of their modest but comfortable Melbourne home. "Sarah," he called out, but the house was still. The kids were at their grandmother's for the weekend, giving them rare time alone. Tom smiled at the thought. Maybe tonight they could go for a nice dinner, talk about anything other than work, the kids, or house chores. As he moved through the house, he thought about how hard they had both been working lately, each in their own world, distant but still connected. 12 years of marriage hadn't been easy, but it was real, honest. At least that's what he believed. He made his way to the bedroom, planning to grab a pen from Sarah's dresser for the shopping list. As he opened the top drawer, something caught his eye. A folded envelope tucked between some papers. It had no stamp, no seal, but the name on it stopped him cold. Ben. His heart skipped a beat, a heavy weight settling in his chest. Ben. He knew the name. Ben Mitchell, Sarah's old boyfriend from university. They hadn't spoken about him in years, but Tom remembered that there had been a time when Ben was the man Sarah thought she'd spend her life with. But that was long before Tom had come into the picture. Curiosity turned into dread as he stared at the envelope. He didn't want to read it. He shouldn't. But his hands moved on their own, picking it up and carefully unfolding the letter inside. His eyes scanned the words, each one hitting him like a blow. "Dear Ben, I've never stopped thinking about you. Sometimes, when the house is quiet and Tom is asleep, I wonder what our life would have been like if you hadn't moved away. I love Tom, I do. But there are moments when I regret not choosing you. I don't know if I can carry this secret much longer. I miss you. I wish you'd never left. Sarah." Tom's world shattered in that moment. The letter dropped from his hands as he stumbled back, his breath shallow and his heart pounding in his chest. He sat on the bed, staring blankly ahead. The silence of the house was deafening, the weight of Sarah's words pressing down on him like a heavy, suffocating blanket. The love of his life, his wife, the mother of his children, had been harboring feelings for someone else. How long had she felt this way? How deep did this go? Was it more than just an unsent letter? A swirl of emotions engulfed him: anger, betrayal, confusion, and a deep sadness. For years, Tom had believed that they had built something unbreakable, a partnership that could withstand any storm. But now, he wasn't so sure. Across town, Sarah Davies sat in a small cafe, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long gone cold. Her mind was 1,000 miles away, replaying the events of the past few months in agonizing detail. She had met Ben by accident at a conference in Sydney. It had been years since they'd last seen each other, and she was surprised by the flood of emotions that hit her when she recognized him across the room. He was older, of course, a little grayer around the edges, but the spark of familiarity was instant. They had exchanged pleasantries, catching up on life and family, but there was an undercurrent beneath the conversation, something unsaid, unresolved. Later that evening, they found themselves in the hotel bar, talking over wine like they used to when they were younger, and the years seemed to melt away. She hadn't meant to stay so late, hadn't meant to let her mind wander to what could have been, but it did. She didn't act on it, of course. She loved Tom. She loved the life they had built together. But Ben represented something different, something lost. After that conference, she couldn't stop thinking about him. She felt guilty, ashamed even, but the feelings wouldn't leave her. So one night, she sat down and wrote the letter. It was never meant to be sent. She just needed to get the words out, to express what she couldn't say aloud. She tucked it away, hoping that would be enough. But the guilt lingered. Sarah knew something was wrong in her marriage. She and Tom had drifted. They rarely talked about anything meaningful anymore, and the routine of life had left them both emotionally exhausted. But she had never imagined it would lead her here, sitting in a cafe, lost in thoughts about a man from her past, wondering if she had made the right choices in life. She checked her watch. It was time to head home. The kids would be staying with Tom's mom for the weekend. And she wanted to talk to Tom tonight, maybe find a way to reconnect. Little did she know what was waiting for her. When Sarah walked into the house later that evening, she found Tom sitting at the kitchen table, the letter laid out in front of him. Her heart stopped, her breath catching in her throat. "Tom," she started, but he cut her off with a look. It was a look she had never seen before. It wasn't anger, not fully, but it was something close. His eyes were filled with hurt, disbelief, and betrayal. "What is this, Sarah?" he asked, his voice steady but cold. He tapped the letter. "Did you write this?" Sarah's legs felt like jelly, and she had to steady herself against the counter. She couldn't lie. Not now. "Yes," she whispered, tears already welling up in her eyes. "But I didn't send it. I didn't." "You didn't send it, but you wrote it. You felt it," Tom said, his voice rising. "How long, Sarah?" "How long have you been in love with him?" "I'm not in love with him," she said, her voice shaky. I don't know why I wrote it, I just—" "Don't lie to me!" Tom shouted, standing up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Don't you dare lie to me now, Sarah! You don't write a letter like this unless you mean it." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she struggled to find the right words. "I love you, Tom. I love our life together. But sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if things had been different. I never meant to act on it. I never meant to hurt you." Tom stared at her, his heart breaking all over again. "But you did, Sarah. You hurt me more than you'll ever know." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of her confession hanging between them like a dark cloud. Sarah wanted to reach out to him, to hold him, to make it all better, but she knew it wasn't that simple. Not this time. Tom turned away, running a hand through his hair. "I need to think," he muttered, and without another word, he walked out the door. Tom drove for hours that night, his mind racing. He ended up at a small park on the outskirts of town, a place he used to go when he needed to clear his head. He sat on a bench, staring out at the moonlit sky, trying to make sense of everything. Was this the end? Could he ever trust Sarah again? Could they rebuild what had been broken? He thought about their life together, the good and the bad. Their wedding day, when Sarah had looked at him with so much love in her eyes that he thought his heart would burst. The birth of their first child, the way Sarah had held his hand and smiled through the pain. The countless nights they had stayed up late, talking about their dreams for the future. But then he thought about the distance that had grown between them in recent years. The way they barely talked anymore, except to discuss the kids or the bills. The way Sarah had seemed distant, distracted, like she was always somewhere else. Had he been blind to it all? Had he missed the signs that something was wrong? He wasn't sure. All he knew was that he was in pain, deep, aching pain, and he didn't know how to fix it. Back at home, Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the letter on the nightstand. She hated herself for writing it. She hated herself even more for hurting Tom. She thought about the early days of their relationship, when everything had been so easy, so full of joy. They had met at a mutual friend's barbecue, and she had been instantly drawn to his quiet strength, his kindness, his unwavering loyalty. They had built a life together, an imperfect, messy, beautiful life. And she had thrown it all away with one stupid letter. But it wasn't just the letter, she realized. It was everything that had led up to it. the emotional distance, the unspoken frustrations, the unmet needs. She had been lost in her own dissatisfaction, and instead of reaching out to Tom, she had retreated into her memories of Ben, using him as an escape from the reality of her marriage. Now she had to face the consequences of her actions. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between Tom and Sarah remained. They barely spoke, and when they did, it was strained and awkward. Tom had moved into the guest room, and the silence in the house was deafening. They started seeing a marriage counselor, though neither of them was sure if it would help. The first few sessions were painful, filled with accusations, hurt feelings, and tears. Tom was angry at Sarah, angry at himself for not seeing it sooner, angry at the world for pulling them apart. But slowly, something shifted. Through the counselor's guidance, they began to talk. Really talk. For the first time in years, they shared their fears, their insecurities, their regrets. Tom admitted that he had been neglecting their emotional connection, focusing too much on work and not enough on their relationship. Sarah confessed that she had been using her feelings for Ben as a way to avoid dealing with her unhappiness. It wasn't easy. Some days it felt like they were taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but they kept at it, determined to find their way back to each other. One evening, months after the letter had been discovered, Tom and Sarah sat on their porch, watching the sun set over the horizon. The air was warm, the sky painted in hues of orange and pink. "I don't know if we'll ever be the same," Tom said quietly, his hand resting on the arm of his chair. "I don't either," Sarah replied, her voice soft. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe we can be something new, something better." Tom turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "Do you still think about him?" Sarah hesitated for a moment before shaking her head. "Number, I don't. Not anymore." Tom nodded, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "I want to believe that, Sarah. I really do." "I know," she whispered, reaching out to take his hand. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving it to you." They sat in silence for a long time, watching the sun dip below the horizon. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but for the first time in a long time, they felt like they were on the same page, facing the future together. Thank you for reading. Do you think Tom and Sarah will make it through? Have you ever faced something similar in your own life? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional, heartfelt stories.